In the late 6th century, as the Byzantine Empire teetered on the edge of collapse, a boy named Heraclius was born into a world of fading glory and rising threats. The year was around 575 AD, and the rugged province of Cappadocia, nestled in the heart of Anatolia, was his birthplace. Cappadocia, with its stark landscapes of rocky plateaus and ancient cave dwellings, was a land shaped by both Roman tradition and the harsh realities of the frontier. Heraclius' family was of Armenian descent, their roots tracing back to the noble clans of the Caucasus, a heritage that imbued them with a fierce sense of pride and resilience. His father, also named Heraclius, was a distinguished general under Emperor Maurice, having earned fame for his campaigns in the east against the Sassanid Persians, while his mother, Epiphania, was a devout Christian whose faith would deeply influence her son's life. The elder Heraclius's military career brought the family prestige, but also Perile lived in a modest villa near Caesarea, their days filled with the echoes of war stories and the constant threat of Persian raids, a backdrop that would shape young Heraclius's destiny as a warrior and leader. Heraclius grew up as an only child, his father's military duties often keeping him away, leaving the boy in the care of his mother and the local priests who taught him scripture and the virtues of faith. By the age of 7, he was already riding horses through Cappadocia's rugged terrain, his small frame clinging to the saddle as he raced across the plateaus, his laughter mingling with the wind. His father, when home, took him on hunting trips, teaching him the art of tracking and the importance of strategy lessons that would later define his military career. A general must see the battlefield before the battle begins, the elder Heraclius would say, his voice steady, as he showed his son how to read the land, a skill that would one day outmaneuver empires. At 12, Heraclius witnessed his first taste of war's realia. Persian raiding party attacked a nearby village, their torches lighting the night as screams filled the air. The elder Heraclius led a counterattack, driving the raiders off, but the sight of burning homes and the cries of the wounded left a mark on young Heraclius, a reminder that the empire he was born into was fragile, its borders under constant siege, its glory a distant memory. By 590, at the age of 15, Heraclius joined his father's retinue, serving as a page in the Byzantine army during campaigns in Armenia, a region contested by both Byzantium and the Sassanids. The army was a harsh school. Heraclius carried messages through snowy mountain passes, polished armor under torchlight, and learned to wield a sword alongside grizzled veterans who mocked his youth but respected his lineage. His father's reputation opened doors, but it was Heraclius's own determination that earned him respect. That trained tirelessly, his body hardening with each march, his mind sharpening as he absorbed the tactics of siege and skirmish. By 595, at 20, he was appointed to a minor command under his father, now the Exarch of Africa, a position that saw the family relocated to Carthage, the empire's western stronghold. Carthage was a city of contrasts. Ancient walls spoke of Roman grandeur, but its streets buzzed with unrest, the local population chafing under Byzantine rule. Heraclius, now a young officer, led patrols through the desert outskirts, facing Berber raids with a calm that belied his age, his quick thinking saving his unit from ambushes more than once. In Carthage, Heraclius's faith deepened, his mother's teachings blending with the city's vibrant Christian community, a faith that would later guide his reign. He also forged a bond with his future wife, Fabia, a noblewoman whose quiet strength matched his own, their betrothal a promise of stability in a turbulent world. By 608, at 33, Heraclius was a seasoned commander, his father's right hand in Africa, their loyalty to Maurice unwavering even as the empire descended into chaos under Emperor Phocas, a usurper whose brutal reign alienated the provinces. Heraclius's early career was a crucible, forging a leader whose faith, resilience, and strategic mind would soon be tested on a grand stage, as the empire he loved faced its darkest hour, calling him to a destiny that would reshape history. In 610 AD, the Byzantine Empire stood on the brink of collapse, its once mighty borders crumbling under the weight of internal strife and external threats. Heraclius, now 35, had spent his early years honing his skills in Carthage, the lessons of his father's campaigns, and the resilience forged in Cappadocia's rugged hills, shaping him into a seasoned commander. But the empire he had sworn to serve was a shadow of its former self-emperor Phocas, a brutal usurper who had murdered Maurice in 603, ruled with an iron fist, his tyranny sparking rebellions across the provinces. The Sassanid Persians, sensing weakness, launched devastating invasions, seizing Mesopotamia and Armenia, while the Avars and Slavs ravaged the Balkans. In Carthage, Heraclius and his father, the exarch of Africa, watched in horror as the empire bled, their loyalty to Maurice's memory fueling a daring plan to restore order. The skills Heraclius had developed in his youth strategy, leadership, and an unshakable faith would now be tested on the grandest stage as he embarked on a journey to seize the throne and reform an empire on the edge of ruin. The rebellion against Phocas began in 608, when the elder Heraclius, with his son by his side, declared Carthage's defiance, rallying the province's forces to their cause. Heraclius, tasked with leading the naval expedition to Constantinople, assembled a fleet of 200 ships, their sails emblazoned with the Chi, a Christian symbol that reflected his deep faith and the divine mission he believed he was on. The journey was perilous, storms battered the fleet, and Phocas's loyalists blockaded key ports. But Heraclius's determination held firm, his voice steady as he rallied his men. "We sail for God and empire!" On October 3, 610, he landed near Constantinople, the city's golden domes, a stark contrast to its streets, where riots raged and Phocas's grip weakened. The populace, weary of the usurper's cruelty, welcomed Heraclius as a savior, their cheers echoing as he marched through the gates. 2 days later, Phocas was overthrown in a swift coup captured by Heraclius's troops. He was executed, his body burned in the Forum of the Ox, a grim end to a reign of terror. On October 5, 610, Heraclius was crowned emperor in the Hagia Sophia, the patriarch placing the diadem on his head as the crowd chanted, "Long live the emperor!" At 35, the boy from Cappadocia had become the ruler of an empire in crisis, his coronation a beacon of hope in a darkening world. Heraclius's first task as emperor was to rebuild a military that had been gutted by years of neglect and defeat. The Byzantine army under Phocas was a broken force. Discipline had eroded, soldiers went unpaid, and commanders were more loyal to gold than the empire. Heraclius, drawing on the tactical acumen he had honed in Carthage, set about a series of bold reforms to restore its strength. He restructured the army into smaller, more mobile units called themata, a system that decentralized command, allowing regional governors to raise and maintain troops locally, ensuring faster responses to threats. This reform, rooted in his understanding of frontier warfare from his youth, transformed the empire's defense, giving it the flexibility to face multiple enemies. He also prioritized training. Soldiers were drilled in combined arms tactics, blending infantry, cavalry, and archers into cohesive units, a strategy he had seen his father use against the Persians. Heraclius introduced the akrati, border guards tasked with holding the frontier, their guerrilla tactics a nod to the Berber raids he had faced in Africa. To fund these reforms, Heraclius took drastic measures, melting down church treasures to mint coins, a decision that sparked outrage but filled the treasury, allowing him to pay his troops and hire mercenaries. His faith, a cornerstone of his life since childhood, guided his leadership. He led prayers before battles, his soldiers marching under banners of the true cross, their morale bolstered by the belief that God was on their side. By 612, Heraclius had transformed the army into a disciplined force, its ranks filled with men who saw him not just as an emperor, but as a warrior king, a leader who shared their hardships. His presence on the battlefield a testament to his Cappadocian grit. Yet, the empire's enemies loomed larger than ever. The Sassanids were advancing deeper into Byzantine territory, their armies nearing Jerusalem, a crisis that would demand every ounce of Heraclius's newfound strength, setting the stage for a war that would define his reign. By 612 AD, Heraclius, now 2 years into his reign, had transformed the Byzantine military through his bold reforms, the themata system and rigorous training, restoring a semblance of strength to an empire on the brink. The boy from Cappadocia, who had once ridden through its rugged hills and fought Berber raiders in Carthage, now stood as emperor, his faith and strategic mind honed by years of preparation. But the empire he ruled was under Sigethe, Sassanid Persians, led by the formidable King Khosrow II, had exploited the chaos of Phocas's reign, launching a relentless campaign that saw their armies sweep through Byzantine territories. The skills Heraclius had developed in his youth, the army he had rebuilt with his reforms, would now face their greatest test in a war that would push the empire to the edge of annihilation, a war where failure would mean the end of Byzantine civilization, and where recovery would demand every ounce of Heraclius's resilience. The Sassanid offensive began in earnest in 613, as Khosrow's armies, emboldened by years of unchecked conquest, marched into Syria, their banners fluttering in the desert wind, their cavalry thundering across the plains. Heraclius, determined to reclaim the lost territories, led his newly reformed army eastward, his banners bearing the true cross, a symbol of his unshakable faith. But the campaign was a disaster at the Battle of Antioch in 613. The Byzantine forces, though better trained than under Phocas, were no match for the Sassanid war machine. Khosrow's heavy cavalry, the Clibanarii, clad in shimmering armor, smashed through Heraclius's lines, their lances piercing shield and flesh, while Persian archers rained arrows from the hills. Heraclius, fighting from the front as he had in Carthage, narrowly escaped capture, his army retreating in disarray, leaving Syria to fall. The loss was a crushing blow, a stark reminder that even his reforms could not immediately bridge the gap between the empire's past glory and its present weakness, a lesson that echoed the raids he had faced as a boy in Cappadocia, where survival often meant retreat before a stronger foe. The worst was yet to come in 614. The Sassanids struck at the heart of Christendom, capturing Jerusalem after a brutal siege. The city's fall was a catastrophe. Thousands were massacred, churches were burned, and the true cross, the holiest relic in the empire, was taken as a trophy to Ctesiphon, the Sassanid capital. Heraclius, in Constantinople, received the news with a heavy heart, his faith shaken as he knelt in the Hagia Sophia, praying for guidance. The loss of Jerusalem was not just a military defeat, it was a spiritual wound, a blow to the empire's identity as the protector of Christianity, a wound that Heraclius felt personally. His mother's teachings of devotion, now a call to action. The Sassanids pressed their advantage, seizing Egypt by 619, the empire's breadbasket, plunging Constantinople into famine as grain supplies dwindled. The Avars, sensing weakness, attacked from the north, their siege of Constantinople in 617, a harrowing ordeal that saw Heraclius's capital nearly fall. The city's walls holding only by the grace of divine intervention, so the emperor believed. Faced with these cascading defeats, Heraclius turned inward, his resilience forged in Cappadocia, now his greatest asset. In 620, he retreated to Anatolia with what remained of his army, a shadow of the force he had led to Antioch, their numbers decimated, their morale broken. But Heraclius refused to yield. He spent 2 years reorganizing, drawing on the themata system to raise new troops, training them in the mountains where he had once hunted with his father. He forged alliances with the Khazars, a nomadic people in the Caucasus, their cavalry a vital addition to his forces, a tactic reminiscent of his father's use of local allies in Armenia. Heraclius also deepened his reliance on faith, declaring the war a holy crusade to reclaim the true cross, his speeches rallying the empire's beleaguered people. "We fight for God's light." By 622, he had rebuilt a leaner, more determined army, its soldiers bound by a shared purpose, their emperor a warrior king ready to lead them into the heart of the Sassanid Empire, a campaign that would turn the tide of history. In the spring of 622 AD, Heraclius stood atop a windswept ridge in Anatolia, his armor glinting under the rising sun, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the Sassanid Empire loomed as a dark shadow over the Byzantine world. The boy from Cappadocia, who had once tracked game with his father and fought Berber raiders in Carthage, had risen to emperor, his reforms breathing life into a shattered army, his faith guiding him through the darkest days of defeat. The loss of Jerusalem, the fall of Syria and Egypt, and the near fall of Constantinople under the Avars had tested his resolve. But the 2 years of recovery had forged a leaner, fiercer force, bolstered by Khazar allies and the themata system he had crafted. Now, at 47, Heraclius embarked on a daring counteroffensive, a campaign that would carry him deep into enemy territory, turning the tide against King Khosrow II's Sassanid juggernaut, a war that would demand every ounce of his strategic genius and spiritual fervor, a war that would culminate in a victory so resounding it would echo through history. Heraclius's plan was Audacious would take the fight to the Sassanids, striking at the heart of their empire rather than defending crumbling borders. In April 622, he launched his campaign from Anatolia, leading 50 men Byzantine troops, Khazar cavalry, and local levies across the Armenian highlands, a terrain he knew from his youth, its passes and valleys a chessboard for his tactics. The Sassanids, confident after years of conquest, were unprepared for an invasion so deep into their territory. Heraclius moved with lightning speed, avoiding pitched battles, instead harassing supply lines and ambushing garrisons, his army living off the land as he had learned in Cappadocia's harsh winters. In 623, he struck at Ganzak, a key Sassanid stronghold, burning its stores and retreating before reinforcements could arrive, a blow that rattled Khosrow's court. The following year, he allied with the Khazars, their horsemen sweeping through Azerbaijan, forcing the Sassanids to split their forces. Heraclius's faith was his anchor. He carried a relic of the true cross, leading prayers before each march, his soldiers chanting hymns as they advanced, their morale a fire that burned brighter with every victory, a stark contrast to the despair of 614. The turning point came in 626, when the Sassanids, in league with the Avars, launched a dual assault on Constantinople, a siege that threatened to end Heraclius's reign. The emperor, trusting his reformed themata to hold the capital, remained in the east, a gamble that showcased his strategic depth. In Constantinople, the city's walls, manned by local troops and bolstered by Greek fire, repelled the Avars, their ships sinking in flames as the Byzantine navy triumphed. Meanwhile, Heraclius pressed his campaign, defeating a Sassanid army at the Battle of Sarus in 625, his cavalry outflanking the enemy with precision, a tactic honed from his father's teachings. But the greatest test awaited December 627. At the Battle of Nineveh, Heraclius faced Khosrow's elite Spabad Rahzad with 25 men, against a force twice his size. The battlefield, a frozen plain near the Great Zab River, was a cauldron of chaos. Sassanid elephants charged, their trumpets echoing, while Byzantine archers rained arrows from the hills. Heraclius, leading from the front as he had in Carthage, feigned a retreat, drawing the Sassanids into a traphus. Khazar allies struck from the flank, their sabers flashing while his infantry closed the net. Rahzad fell, pierced by a lance, and the Sassanid army broke, their retreat a rout that left the road to Ctesiphon open, a victory that turned the war's tide. Heraclius pursued his advantage, marching on Ctesiphon in early 628, but Khosrow, now a broken man, was overthrown by his own son, Kavad II, who sued for peace. The terms were staggering. Sassanid forces withdrew from all occupied Byzantine lands, returning Syria, Egypt, and Jerusalem, and the true cross was sent back to Constantinople. a relic reclaimed with tears of joy. In March 629, Heraclius entered Jerusalem in triumph, his purple cloak flowing as he carried the true cross to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the city's bells ringing, its people kneeling in gratitude. The victory was a personal vindication. His faith, tested by the loss of 614, had guided him to this moment, his reforms proven on the battlefield, his resilience, a legacy from his Cappadocian roots. The empire, once on the brink, breathed again, its borders restored, its spirit renewed, a testament to Heraclius's leadership. Yet the triumph came at a cost. Heraclius's health was fraying, his body worn by years of campaigning, his face lined with the weight of command. The court celebrated, Justinian's memory invoked as Heraclius's achievements rivaled those of the past, but new threats loomed on the horizon. From the deserts of Arabia, a new power was rising. Islam, under the Prophet Muhammad, was unifying the tribes, their armies poised to challenge the weakened empires of Byzantium and Sassanid. Heraclius, basking in his victory, could not foresee the storm approaching, a challenge that would test the empire he had saved, a challenge that would demand a new kind of war, one that would stretch his legacy into uncharted territory. In 629 AD, Heraclius stood at the pinnacle of his reign, his victory over the Sassanid Empire, a triumph that had restored the Byzantine Empire's borders and reclaimed the true cross, a moment of glory etched in the memory of Jerusalem's weeping citizens. The boy from Cappadocia, who had risen through military reforms and strategic brilliance, had led his empire through the darkest days, his faith and resilience a beacon for a battered realm. But as he returned to Constantinople, his body weary from years of war, a new storm gathered on the horizon, a storm born in the deserts of Arabia, where the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad had unified the tribes under Islam, their armies now poised to challenge the weakened empires of Byzantium and Sassanid Persia. Heraclius, at 54, faced a foe unlike any he had encountered, a foe driven by faith as fierce as his own, a foe that would test the empire he had fought so hard to save, setting the stage for a battle that would reshape the world. The rise of Islam began under Muhammad, who died in 632, leaving his successor, Caliph Abu Bakr, to unify the Arabian tribes into a formidable force. By 633, under Abu Bakr and his successor Umar, Muslim armies launched their first incursions into Byzantine territory, their speed and zeal catching the empire off guard. Heraclius, still recovering from the Sassanid Wars, received reports of Arab raids in Syria, their horsemen striking with lightning precision, their banners bearing the crescent moon. The emperor, his health faltering, initially underestimated the threat, believing his reformed themata could handle what he saw as mere desert raiders. He dispatched a small force under his brother Theodore to repel them, but at the Battle of Muta in 629, the Byzantines were routed, Theodore barely escaping with his life, a defeat that signaled the growing power of this new enemy. Heraclius, his faith once a source of strength, now wrestled with doubt. Had God, who had guided him to Nineveh, abandoned him to this new peril? By 634, the Muslim advance intensified, their armies seizing Damascus and much of Syria, the region Heraclius had fought so hard to reclaim from the Sassanids. The emperor, realizing the gravity of the threat, rallied his forces, drawing on the themata system to muster 40 men, a mix of veterans and fresh recruits, their morale shaky after years of war. In 636, Heraclius sent his trusted general Vahan to confront the Muslim forces, led by the brilliant Khalid ibn al-Walid, at the Yarmouk River in Syria. The Battle of Yarmouk, fought over 6 days in August, was a catastrophe for Byzantium. Khalid's army, though smaller at 20-0, was united by faith and disciplined ferocity, their cavalry outmaneuvering Vahan's heavier troops. A sandstorm on the final day blinded the Byzantines, their lines breaking as Khalid's forces struck with devastating precision, cutting down thousands, Vahan himself falling in the chaos. Heraclius, in Antioch when the news arrived, wept openly, his voice breaking as he lamented, "Farewell, Syria, forever." The loss of Yarmouk was a turning point. Syria, Palestine, and eventually Egypt fell to the Muslims. The empire's richest provinces lost, its borders shrinking to Anatolia's edge. Heraclius, his health deteriorating, retreated to Constantinople, his spirit crushed by the defeat. The resilience he had shown in Cappadocia, the strategic mind that had outwitted Khosrow, could not stem this tide. Islam's rise was a force of history, its momentum unstoppable, its warriors driven by a faith that rivaled his own. The emperor's final years would be marked by this loss, his legacy now a paradox of triumph and tragedy, a paradox that would weigh heavily as his health declined, setting the stage for the empire's struggle to survive in a new world. By 636 AD, Heraclius, once the savior of the Byzantine Empire, stood as a broken man in Constantinople, the city he had defended against the Sassanids and Avars, now a refuge for his weary soul. The victory at Nineveh in 627, the reclamation of the true cross, and the restoration of Jerusalem had marked the zenith of his reign, a testament to the resilience he had forged in Cappadocia and the strategic brilliance honed in Carthage. But the rise of Islam, culminating in the catastrophic defeat at Yarmouk, had stripped away those gains, leaving the empire a shadow of its former glory. Heraclius, at 61, was no longer the vigorous warrior who had led charges against Khosrow II. His health was failing, his spirit battered by loss, and his legacy, a complex tapestry of triumph and tragedy, a legacy that would endure as both a beacon of hope and a cautionary tale for the empire he had fought to save. Heraclius's physical decline began during the Sassanid campaigns, the grueling marches through Armenia's mountains and the stress of constant warfare taking their toll. By the time of Yarmouk, he was already suffering from chronic fatigue, his once robust frame weakened, his hands trembling as he held reports of the Muslim advance. In 637, as Syria and Egypt fell, Heraclius developed dropsy, a condition that caused his body to swell with fluid, his legs so heavy he could barely walk. Confined to the palace, he relied on crutches, his voice a hoarse whisper as he dictated orders, his eyes clouded with pain and regret. The emperor, who had once ridden at the head of his army, now watched from afar, his themata system struggling to hold the line against the Muslim tide, their numbers decimated by years of war. His personal life mirrored his physical decline. His first wife, Fabia, had died in 612, and his second marriage to his niece Martina in 622 had sparked scandal, the court whispering of incest, their children plagued by ill health, a sign to many that God had turned against him. The loss of the empire's richest provinces weighed heavily on Heraclius's mind, the memory of Yarmouk, a wound that never healed. He attempted to stabilize what remained, issuing the Ekthesis in 638, a religious edict aimed at unifying the empire's fractured Christian sects through the monothelite doctrine, a compromise that instead deepened divisions, alienating Rome and fueling unrest. His court, once united by his victories, now buzzed with discontent. Nobles blamed him for the Muslim conquests, while Martina's influence grew, her ambition a source of tension as she pushed her son's claim to the throne. Heraclius, isolated and frail, retreated into his faith, spending hours in the Hagia Sophia, praying for the empire's survival, his mother's teachings a faint comfort in his twilight years. By 640, he was a shell of the man who had reclaimed Jerusalem, his body failing, his reign overshadowed by the empire's shrinking borders, his spirit haunted by the knowledge that he could not stem the tide of history. Yet, Heraclius's legacy endures as one of the most profound in Byzantine history, a testament to his earlier triumphs and the foundations he laid. His themata system, born from his reforms, became the backbone of the empire's defense, enabling it to survive centuries of invasions, its decentralized structure a model of resilience. His victory over the Sassanids, though overshadowed by the Muslim conquests, delayed the empire's collapse, buying time for Byzantium to adapt to a new world order. Heraclius's emphasis on faith as a unifying force, while flawed in execution, set a precedent for the empire's identity as a Christian bulwark, a legacy that would define its culture for generations. Historians view him as a bridge between the ancient and medieval world. His reign marked the end of Roman universalism and the beginning of a distinctly Byzantine era, his Greek-speaking court a shift from Latin tradition, a transformation rooted in his pragmatic leadership. Heraclius's final days were spent preparing for an uncertain future, his empire battered but enduring, his legacy a paradox of brilliance and loss, a paradox that would shape the reigns of those who followed as the empire faced new challenges in a rapidly changing world. In the winter of 641 AD, Heraclius lay on a bed in Constantinople's great palace, his once commanding voice reduced to a faint whisper, his body ravaged by dropsy and age. The emperor, who had risen from Cappadocia's rugged hills, who had reclaimed the true cross from the Sassanids and faced the rising tide of Islam at Yarmouk, now faced his final battle. At 66, his reign had spanned 31 years of triumph and tragic victories at Nineveh. The themata reforms and the restoration of Jerusalem stood as monuments to his genius, while the loss of Syria and Egypt to the Muslims weighed on his soul. His second wife, Martina, knelt beside him, her tears falling as their children gathered, the court silent, the Hagia Sophia's distant bells tolling a mournful hymn. On February 11, 641, Heraclius breathed his last, his eyes closing on an empire he had saved from ruin, yet left vulnerable to a new world order, a warrior king whose legacy would rise like a phoenix from the ashes of his reign. Heraclius's death marked the end of an era, but his influence endured as a cornerstone of Byzantine survival. The themata system, his brainchild, became the empire's lifeline, enabling it to withstand centuries of Arab invasions, its decentralized strength a testament to his foresight. His victory over the Sassanids, though overshadowed by the Muslim conquests, preserved Byzantine identity, delaying its fall and shaping its medieval destiny. Heraclius's embrace of Greek as the empire's language, a shift from Latin, redefined its culture, laying the foundation for the Byzantine Renaissance under later emperors. His faith, a guiding light through war and loss, inspired the empire's Christian ethos, its churches echoing with prayers he had once led, a spiritual legacy that outlived his physical decline. Picture him atop a war horse at Nineveh, his banner of the true cross fluttering as he outwitted Khosrow, or entering Jerusalem in triumph, the city's bells ringing in redemption. See him standing firm as Yarmouk's sands swallowed his dreams, his resilience a flame that never died. Heraclius was no mere ruler, he was a titan, a bridge between Rome's past and Byzantium's future, his story a saga of courage, faith, and sacrifice. His empire endured, its borders shrinking but its spirit unbroken, a testament to the man who dared to fight when all seemed lost. Join us again, subscribe, and explore this epic tale. Let Heraclius's legacy ignite your own journey to greatness.